Starstruck.
Well, welcome back to a new episode of Joyride. I am Jared Brandon Flandy, and
I am Adam Mendenhall.
And this is the show where we talk about all things transportation and adventure. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Hot.
Yeah, same here. It's the heat wave is upon us now.
So we have a story episode today, and what inspired this one is that we did that Model T episode not too long ago, right? And so when I was researching that, I was learning quite a bit about Ford Motor Company lore, right? And I kind of knew about this, but I stumbled across a story, and I went, oh, this isn't just like worth mentioning in one episode. This is worth an entire episode itself. So the title to this is Welcome to the Jungle. No, it's not what you think. Fordlandia.
Okay, you had me on the Van Halen track already there.
No, it's not a Van Halen story. It's not a Van Halen story, but nonetheless, okay, it does take place in the jungle, okay? So, you ready for a little story time here?
I am.
So, here we go. Utopia. A concept that has been as sought after by humanity just as much as immortality. But what is utopia? According to the Cambridge English Dictionary, utopia is a perfect society in which people work well with each other and are happy. Is that a fair enough assessment?
That's fair enough, yeah.
Okay. Many have tried and failed at this attempt, but many more have come after them, hoping they'll be able to achieve such a positive and lofty ambition. One of these individuals was a man from Michigan. His name was Henry Ford.
Of course, the man himself.
In the 1920s, the Ford Motor Company was almost godlike. Products such as the Model T allowed the average family to own an automobile for the first time in their lives, but the company itself would do far more than this, however. And I'd like to point out, if you are more interested in the Model T, of course, definitely check out that episode. And also like this one, this is not a Henry Ford biography, so we're just kind of picking out certain stories from what he was involved with. But we might get to a Henry Ford biography at some point in the future here. So, Ford factories became symbols of both societal and economic reform. Immigrant workers were indoctrinated with hardworking American values and paid wages that were nearly unheard of in a driven capitalist society. So that $5 a day wage, which was a pretty big deal at the time.
That was huge at the time.
Yeah. At the heart of all this reform was someone who is now being considered a modern messiah, Mr. Henry Ford. Henry Ford's personality and outlook on life could be described as practical and efficient. He was a man who did not drink or smoke and adhered to a vegetarian diet. Above all else, he believed hard work was the one-way ticket to success. And for a man who did not drink or smoke and was a vegetarian, that was considered very odd at that time.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, that's almost standard
Today.
Or slightly progressive, but nothing strange by any means.
No, not at all.
So if you're going back almost 100 years, this made people scratch their heads a bit, okay? So as Ford was becoming one of the most wealthy and powerful men in the world, he came to the conclusion everyone else in the world should live just like him. So naturally, as a rich man becomes a richer man, I think they start to lose touch with reality a bit.
Yeah, that seems to be a trend over time.
Mm-hmm. Consequently, he set out to become what can only be described as a prophet of good living. As the Ford empire was growing faster than ever, Mr. Ford himself began to practice value systems akin to social engineering. He encouraged employees to not consume alcohol and also strongly discouraged smoking, as I was saying earlier, something that was seen as highly controlling and peculiar for the time. Because everyone smokes back then. It was rare for someone not to, you know?
It really was. And totally commonplace.
And they didn't really know it was bad for you. So just like, why you tell me I can't do this? You know, It was kind of like an infringement on individual rights in a lot of ways.
It really was.
He took things further by ordering the creation of what basically was a vice squad that routinely patrolled the homes of Ford employees. So he sent goons in. This company goon squad would check to see if any alcohol was being held within their homes and also rigorously enforce policies that reinforced hygiene and cleanliness. That one I can sort of get on board with. But nonetheless, you're sending good people to tell you how to live. That's his approach here.
Yeah, talk about overstepping your boundaries there. Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So, with every month that passed, Henry Ford became more and more ruthlessly efficient. To put this in perspective, at one point in the early 20th century, 9 out of 10 cars in the world were produced by the Ford Motor Company. It goes without saying, Ford and his company were on top of the world. The company also had the luxury of producing nearly all the components that were required to build cars such as the Model T, something that is not, for the most part, practiced today. I believe, like, on average, it's something like only a third is produced in-house by a manufacturer now.
It really is, yeah.
A lot of it is third-party that they bring in and assemble the car, whoever they are. So, like I said, they built a lot of their own components, but there was one exception, however. For any car to get from point A to point B, it requires 4 tires to be secured to the wheels that allow the car to travel, right? The natural latex needed to create rubber tires was one of the few things the Ford Motor Company was not able to produce independently. So they have no control over the production of their tires for the most part.
Major component.
Yep. Most of the world's rubber at this time came from British colonies in South Asia. Particular areas of production would include Sri Lanka. In other words, the British Empire had almost complete control of the world's natural rubber trade at this point in time.
Wow, that's interesting.
Most rubber being produced at this time was predominantly what could only be described as most rubber being produced at this time was using predominantly what can only be described as slave labor, and the human cost was staggering. This is not a very fun part of the story, but it has been estimated that for every one rubber tire made, it cost 1 human life.
That's a crazy statistic.
Wow. That's comforting, right? The rubber tree is a species that is native to South America and historically was a crop that was grown in the rainforests of Brazil. The British brought rubber trees to Asia for a number of reasons, but one of the main ones was Asia did not have the same predatory insects that had traditionally always plagued rubber plantations in Brazil, so bugs eating at the trees, basically. In Asia, they didn't have that problem. So that's what attracted these British rubber plantations to go there.
Yeah. Okay.
With so much rubber concentrated in control of the British Empire, Henry Ford thought it would be wise to have his own complete control of latex in order to make tires for all those gleaming black Model Ts that were coming out of Ford factories all around the world. Not having complete control over all means of production was something Henry Ford could not tolerate. His old friend Thomas Edison suggested a solution, however, which was a new hydroelectric dam facility being built in Muscle Shore, Alabama. So he's saying you could use this for something. This could be a good point of operation for what you're thinking.
A resource.
Yeah. The dam was being built to provide power to a nitrate factory, but after World War I, the demand for nitrate had dwindled considerably, so for explosives and whatnot, right? Edison thought this would be an ideal place for Henry to construct a new facility that would help his supply chain issues. So apparently, even before COVID. Supply chain issues sometimes could be an issue.
Still a problem.
Henry loved the idea and quickly began to have high aspirations. Ford himself said, quote, "I will employ 1 million workers at Muscle Shore, and I will build a city 75 miles long."
Whoa.
Ambitious.
That's an ambitious scale, to say the least.
So Mr. Ford initially offered, how much do you think he initially offered to use these facilities?
Oh, my gosh. I don't know. I'm going to say $100,000.
It was a bit more than that. $5 million.
$5 million?
Okay. To use the dam and build in the area, but that would be about $80 million today.
Wow.
So he's offering a good chunk of change. He also proposed he would return the project back to the government halfway through his proposed 100-year lease, and also promised that he nor his heirs would receive any monetary benefit from the operation. I'll give you $80 million, 100 years, we don't profit from it.
In 100 years, who cares? In his eyes.
Right. Henry may have achieved this vision if it had not been for a worthy adversary that put a roadblock in front of his plan. This adversary was a Republican senator from Nebraska named George Norris. Norris did not trust Henry Ford. He felt the dam would better benefit the public instead of being in the hands of a private owner. I'm not trying to get political, but I'd like to point out this is a Republican politician, too. He wanted it to be not in the hands of a private owner. The House of Representatives would approve of Ford's proposal, but it was eventually shot down by the Senate. Henry did not take this blow lightly, and he blamed it mostly on the, quote, the international Jews on Wall Street.
Wow. What a different era.
I didn't get too much into that. Like I said, if we ever do a biography episode, we'll get into the anti-Semitism and why, of course, it's not a good thing.
No, it's not. Part of history, nonetheless. Yeah.
Yeah. So, much like Richard Attenborough's character in Jurassic Park, Mr. Ford settled on an even grander ambition, an entire company town built to his exact tastes and specifications.
Whoa, an entire town tailored to your needs.
Yeah, and to kind of go back, before I get really hung up on that, but get back to the anti-Semitism thing, I've read that for a farmer from Michigan, or a farm boy from Michigan of his time, he was relatively normal. For his time.
For his time.
But even for his time, and if you still think that way, I don't think you're a very good person. But aside from that, so even though the British colonial plantations were starting to lose their monopoly by this point, Henry thought the best place to grow rubber trees is where the trees were originally native to, Brazil. In order to drum up support for the project, it was described as, quote, an epic adventure, which it would be in more ways than one. Henry sent 2 men to negotiate with the government of Brazil for an ideal piece of land and how much it would cost. The plot of land would be located in the state of Pará in an area known as Boa Vista, which was nestled deep in the Amazon River basin. The chosen plot of land was located near the, if my Spanish is correct, the Tapajós River, and spanned a distance of 5,625 square miles, or about 2.5 million acres. Big area.
That is a big area.
Now, this varies depending upon the source, and it's not known for whether Ford's liaisons had done this on purpose, but Ford probably ended up overpaying by $125,000, or about $1.85 million in today's money. Another arrangement that was made was the Ford Motor Company would not have to pay any taxes on goods they exported from Brazil, but they'd still have to pay 9% to the state and the local governments from the main profits.
Oh.
So this is an okay deal.
Yeah, not as great as it originally sounded.
Yeah. This was only the beginning of complications that would occur during the early period of Fordlandia. One of the reasons the final site was chosen was it featured a natural elevation that would help in the event of flooding. The natural elevation of the area would cause an additional complication, however. In order for the water to be deep enough for the supply ships to reach the site, they could only travel there during the rainy season. So they can only get there during certain times of the year. They can't just come and go as they please. So another problem. Consequently, the construction of Fordlandia did not begin until 1929. And you know why you're laughing. That same year, the
Model T.
Great Depression had begun.
And that too. Yep.
Yeah. So before the town could be built, though, the area had to be stripped and cleared of the thick jungle that covered the area. This was mostly done with local labor, but would prove to be very difficult and dangerous. The timing of this could not have been worse. Some of these problems were partly due to the fact that Henry Ford, for the most part, did not consult any experts, such as agronomists and botanists, since he did not have much respect for educated people.
God.
His attitude was he was very successful despite having little education himself, so why should he have a bunch of pompous academics tell him what to do? That was his attitude.
That puts it in perspective.
Well, I do know, everyone's had teachers that you have difficulties with, and I, to a certain degree, I'd see why maybe he'd think this way. But nonetheless, you want to consult experts when you don't know much about the topic yourself, which is something he completely failed to do. So, the local workers were excited about the project nonetheless. They heard stories about being paid $5 a day and 8-hour work days, just like that was being done in the U.S., right? This in many ways sounded great to the locals, but it would not take long for cultures to clash. So the problem was that the locals liked to work during only certain times of the day due to the heat of the jungle. They live there. They get it, right? Okay. Despite this, Henry Ford thought the American work ethic of a continuous shift all day was better. As a result, the workers were forced to work in the excruciatingly hot sun all day long.
Oof.
During October and November, it was not uncommon for temperatures in the jungle to reach in excess of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yikes.
Many of the workers were bare-chested, which caused them to routinely be bit by insects like ants and jiggers. Now, I have been to South America. Jiggers are terrible. It's like a mosquito, but worse.
Ugh.
It's like double it or triple the amount of itching and pain. Well, scorpions hiding in the undergrowth were another problem. As a result, the work was brutal and the mortality rate began to climb as the clearing of the jungle continued. The project manager was another curious problem. This being a Ford employee named William Blakely, who was a raging alcoholic. Which was a peculiar choice since Henry Ford did not drink himself.
That is.
Blakely's alcohol problem unsurprisingly caused him to behave strangely at times. For example, he was known throughout the Brazilian town of Belém for routinely strutting about completely naked on the balcony of his hotel room in full view of everyone in the city.
Oh, my God. There's a sight. Eventually,
Blakely's bare-naked antics, along with other examples of his incompetence, caused him to be replaced by a gentleman named Einar Oxholm. Despite Oxholm's good intentions, he would also prove not to be the best choice as a jungle project manager either, since he was a professional sea captain. This guy tried hard, but once again, he's just like, I don't know what to do in an environment like this. I know boats and oceans.
Yeah, he's taken out of his element.
Yeah, exactly. So even though all this was occurring, more ships still kept coming in through, though. As time passed, buildings began to rise, with the town's water tower being the main landmark. Now picture this. The blue Ford Oval was proudly on display for all of Brazil to see. Before Henry Ford became a captain of industry, he started out life as a simple farm boy in the late 19th century. When he began to build his utopia, he took inspiration from his youthful experiences. Midwestern-style towns began to pop up in the exotic locale. Some of them even had running water and electricity. But these so-called villas were only for the American managers, and one was even built for Henry Ford's son Edsel. So only the white guys coming from Michigan are getting the good places. Yeah. The native workers, on the other hand, had to live in much more modest housing that did not feature amenities such as running water and would have to rely upon wells. Despite the multiple problems and loss of life that occurred, the town would eventually be built to an operational capacity. Aside from the machine shops and other buildings required for rubber production, there was a plethora of other buildings that provided services to the workers. Now, take a guess what some of these might be.
Oh, I'm going to just say the good old brothel, perhaps.
Do you think Henry would have approved of that?
Probably not.
We'll get there. Yeah. Some of these buildings would be places such as a hospital, a dining hall that included a full-service waitstaff, a swimming pool, and even a golf course.
Oh.
Okay, well, not bad. Even though the town did feature these leisure facilities, Fordlandia was not exactly a fun place to live. Did you hear brothel in that description? No.
I did.
Henry Ford, of course, was a vegetarian, and he insisted the dining hall served the most basic food possible, which mostly consisted of oatmeal and canned peaches on a daily basis.
Oh, pretty basic.
The local Brazilians were not a big fan of these things, since it was food they were not accustomed to. So, you know, we've been to Brazilian barbecues. It's lots of good, tasty meat, right? So, oatmeal peaches, even though I'm not necessarily against that, is something that they're not too cool about every day. Yeah. Celebrating common American holidays, such as the 4th of July, was also an aspect of the town the locals found odd and not very appealing. And this isn't American bashing, I'd like to point out. This is just, they're trying to enforce standards on a people that have never done this. So it's no different than if aliens came down and told you and me to do something. It's just like, no, I'm confused. It's a lot of confusion here.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah. The wives of the American managers were another group who were starting to feel the Fordlandia blues. This was mostly due to the fact there was no places for them to go shopping like they had done in Detroit.
Yeah, stark difference between that and their options in Detroit, I'm sure.
Yeah. And mind you, Detroit at this time was the shit,
Oh, yeah.
Not like we think
the
of Detroit.
Mecca, yeah.
So it was almost kind of like a North American Paris in a lot of ways.
It truly was.
Yeah. With morale at a low, Mr. Ford came up with what he thought was an ingenious idea. Okay, it's like, I know what's going to make everyone happy. All right, you want to guess what his great plan is here?
Well, I keep thinking of like theme park or something, but no, he's not that good. No.
Fordlandia would now feature a new entertainment establishment. A dance hall.
Getting closer to my previous guess, but not close enough yet.
This, yet again, was another trope of Henry trying to recreate his Midwestern youth since he met his wife Clara at a square dance.
Again, commonplace back in that era, those dance halls. That was a major gathering point. Yeah.
In Michigan. We're in Brazil.
Yeah, that's...
Okay. Unsurprisingly, the dance hall was not much of a success. Latin Americans, a people who have invented such spirited dances, such as the sultry salsa and the titillating tango.
Ooh, yeah, that's a little more advanced than the old square dancing.
Were not very impressed by the rural Americana concept of the square dance. However, there is, of course, one thing that'll make just about anyone shimmy their way onto the dance floor, and that is the magical potion we all call alcohol.
Oh, it's amazing what that can do. It is truly magical.
Something that was not allowed in Fordlandia.
How do you control that?
As mentioned,
it's a dry land.
It's like Monmouth at one point. Monmouth, Oregon.
That's true.
Which has a college, which will always confuse me.
Yeah.
As mentioned before, Henry Ford did not drink himself, and Prohibition was raging in the United States at the time. Consequently, Fordlandia residents were not allowed to consume alcohol either, even though it was perfectly legal in Brazil. So, Many modern historians consider the American prohibition of alcohol to be one of the largest blunders of the 20th century, since it caused more problems and crime than the period before and since after.
Oh my God. Ironic.
Yeah. It was also in many ways an abhorrent violation of individual rights.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, at the time, most Americans agreed, and speakeasy culture flourished. Things would not be much different in Fordlandia. Many of the town residents would travel to a bar that was set up on an island that was in the river adjacent to the town. It also featured an additional establishment that provided more, quote, sporting activities, you could say. So there's your brothel. Okay. But it was not Henry approved, of course.
Yeah.
The secret spot of recreation was, quote, it was called, quote, the Island of Innocence.
Oh, what a name. That sounds like a reality TV show today.
It does. Tonight on an all-new The Island of Innocence.
Island of Innocence. Not so innocent.
With all these problems happening one after the other, utopia began to crumble. Many Fordlandia employees thought they were going to be paid the standard $5 a day like their American counterparts. But in the end, they would generally only receive 35 cents a day.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's not what I signed up for.
And nope, that was pretty much what they said, too. Yep. This was not what would cause everything to blow up, however, nor was it the housing, or even the restrictions on alcohol consumption, or even the square dancing. It was something much worse.
Ooh, worse than that?
It was the catering. Mind you, these are Latin Americans. They like to eat well.
That's true. They are passionate about their food.
As Fordlandia began to falter, some execs decided to do away with the wait staff service and instead have the workers get their own food cafeteria style. This was coupled with the bland food being offered, and it was just too much to put up with at last. So, a lot of cultures outside of North American, Northern European cultures, food is a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that getting around that dinner table with people is something you do not mess with, okay? And this is something they've completely messed with.
Thrown aside.
Yeah, thrown aside, okay? Things would come to a boiling point when a supervisor named Kaj Ostenfeld began an argument with a stonemason named Manuel Quintano. A riot would soon begin, and they naturally rallied behind Quintano. Fordlandia soon became a war zone, and most of the American managers fled screaming into the jungle. And were only able to escape via the ships that were docked in the river.
Oh, my God.
You think this is working?
Yeah.
Not well. No.
Not well at all.
The head chef, who was at the top of everyone's shit list, ended up having the worst experience out of everyone. He fled into the jungle and was hunted for the next 2 days until he was eventually found.
God. Jeez.
The rebellion would die down, but only after the American managers were able to have the Brazilian military flown in via the help of Juan Trippe, the founder of Pan American Airways, better known as Pan Am.
Mm-hmm.
Archibald Johnson, who had become one of the new managers, tried his best to make Fordlandia better. He would make sure the roads were paved and the remainder of the houses were finally completed. He even converted the dance hall into a movie theater, which did experience a bit more success. The trials of the jungle utopia were not over, however. The main purpose of the town was, of course, to produce rubber, something it was not very good at doing, as time would prove. Part of the problem was that the rubber trees were planted too close. Okay? So rubber trees naturally grow at a distance from each other in Brazil, so pests cannot easily travel between the trees. So evolution has figured this out, okay? This is one of the main reasons the British started to grow the trees in Asia. This part of the world did not feature pests such as red spiders and caterpillars like the ones in Brazil. Also, because the forest trees were planted so close, they began to suffer from blight. New trees were replanted, but they were not any more successful. So finally, an expert botanist was brought in. finally, right? James Ware began to experiment with more disease-resistant trees at a brand new Ford plantation up the river called Belterra. So eventually only 500 workers would be at Fordlandia, while 2,500 would be at Belterra by 1940.
Wow.
Okay, so they got another guy coming in to run things. A sheriff called Curtis Pringle. These names, I don't...
It's just, yeah, comical, but they're real.
Yeah. Decided to lax some of the Dearborn style of living standards and allowed a more Brazilian style of living for the native workers. With this new relocation and new policies, things began to look better for the Ford utopia, but ultimately it still would not last long. In 1942, the United States would enter the Second World War, which caused the American automotive industry to slow car production in order to assist with the war effort. In the end, it was not the jungle, rebellions, or tree diseases that would finally kill Henry Ford's version of utopia. During the height of the war effort, synthetic rubber was developed, and natural latex from rubber trees was not needed anymore nearly as much as it had been before the war.
Game changer.
Yep. Henry Ford II, Henry's grandson, decided to cut the company's losses by selling the entire rubber operation. He would sell all of the Amazonian assets for the amount that was needed to cover the wages and severance that was still owed to the remaining workers. By the mid-1940s, the Americans in Brazil decided it was finally time to pack up and go home. Fordlandia and Belterra were collectively worth $8 million, with a total of $20 million in investment. It was all sold back to the Brazilian government for only $244,200.
Oh, that is crazy. What a loss.
A complete...
Wow.
The total investment in today's money would be over $250 million.
Oh, my God.
Oh. And it was a complete failure for the most part. To add insult to injury and to the disappointment of the people of Fordlandia, the Messiah never came. Despite the millions of dollars spent to build the American wonder town deep in the Amazon rainforest, Henry Ford never did visit his utopia. But the story does not end there. Even as the jungle began to reclaim portions of the town and looting was common, people still continued to live in the area. In the early 21st century, only about 90 people lived in Fordlandia, but by 2017, the town had experienced a bit of a renaissance and now has a population between 2,000 to 3,000. A local woman even lives in the Americaville that was built for Edsel Ford. With the running water, electricity, and whatnot, right? So, with all this said, there are many reasons one could argue that made Fordlandia a failed experiment. But there is one reason that stands out the most, and it would have to be that all too common thing in the modern world: American arrogance.
Ooh.
Yeah. Fordlandia was trying to push certain customs and ideals upon a populace who did not understand them, and in many ways did not want to understand them. I mean, even the Romans knew this. That's why the Roman Empire got so big. They did not enforce their religion and customs on the area. You just were Romans, and they left it be at that. You know. In the end, Fordlandia would be a failed social experiment, but ironically, it did achieve some of Henry Ford's goals in other ways. Ford was a man who desired to recreate the rural way of life of his childhood, the way of life that he himself had a major hand in destroying due to his never-ending thirst for industrial power. Even though the current condition of Fordlandia may be in some despair, it is now inhabited by hard-working people of the land, all working together in harmony to carve out a place called home. In other words, his hope of reviving a bygone era has risen from the ashes, just with one difference. It did not happen in the fields of Michigan, but far, far away in the jungles of Brazil.
Oh, man.
And that is the end of our story.
What a exercise for a company to go through all that. You know, you don't know till you try, but boy, what a
And I don't fault them for trying at all. It's just they went about it the wrong way almost every step of the way.
They did. They stomped on so many things, thinking that they could just plow forward.
That's what it was. Just plow for it. It'll happen. It was just like, no, that's not how a lot of things work.
No.
You got to do your research, which they didn't really do. Two, when problems come forth, you have to typically always adjust and compensate for that, and then work your way through it. They didn't do that. And ultimately, they still, I think, and somebody who might be a really big historian on this might have different thoughts, but ultimately, I think they had so much money into it, they just couldn't stop anymore, right?
Yeah, there was too much invested. They just couldn't. They couldn't turn back.
They knew it was working, or wasn't working, but they couldn't turn back at the same time. That poor chef, though, having to run.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, that's
once again also not necessarily condoning some of the violence, despite the bad moves of the company. But oh, what a human story, nonetheless.
It truly is. What's even more staggering is the Messiah himself never paid a visit.
I know, right?
That's just even more ironic to the entire. It adds to the irony.
Yeah, and it was it was the company's money, but in some ways his money still, and he never lived up to see it. Wow, those ones always just like I always got to take a minute after that.
Well, it is because it's on such a grand scale.
That's grand scale.
It's like you look at fictional stories like Jurassic Park, but I mean that's one that's on just a crazy scale. It's crazy.
It's kind of almost like in Walt Disney, Epcot Center, right? Mm-hmm. He wanted to build an entire town, It was probably even more grandiose than that. Ultimately, that did not happen, but it's not just Henry Ford that seems to come up with these ideas.
No, it's not.
All right. Well, with that said, I think we're going to bring things to a close here. By all means, we're on Patreon. We appreciate any support you can give us. Definitely check out the description or the links in the description box below. And we'll be back with more Joyride soon to come here. How's that sound, Adam?
Sounds good. Till next time.
Until next time. And once again, thanks everyone for listening. All right. Signing out.